Frederick Douglass, The Last Day of Slavery, written by William Miller. Frederick Douglass was born a slave. He never knew his father and saw his mother only a few times. She walked all night through freezing woods, across fields burned white by the moon. She walked all night just to hold him. Frederick remembered her face for the rest of his life. Dark skin, warm eyes, a mouth that broke into a loving smile. His grandmother raised Frederick. She told him that he would never see his mother again, and slave master had sold her to another plantation many miles away. Frederick tried to understand, but when he thought of his mother, tears and more tears came into his eyes. He soon learned that every children were expected to work in the fields. Behind the grown-ups, he pulled weeds that grew between the corn rows. Only on Saturday was he allowed a few hours of play, but Frederick was shy and didn't care for the other children's games. He thought about his mother, why she had to go away. He wondered why he was a slave, and why was the master the master. All around him, Frederick saw frightened people, men and women who walked with their head down, who never spoke above a whisper when the overseer was nearby. But still the overseer would beat them. Once, Frederick saw him whip the master's favorite slave. The old man had overslept, forgotten to groom the master's prized stallion. Frederick felt the blow on his back, on the back of all the slaves who stood behind him. At night, when he laid beside the fire, Frederick would plan to escape. He dreamed of running away to the north, to the cities where black people had no fear of whites. He dreamed of stealing a boat, rowing down the river to the sea, rowing all the way to New York. But all Frederick could do was dream. The master expected more of him as he grew older, stronger. Sometimes in the fall, Frederick worked in the fields until midnight. The first light of dawn found him back in the same row of cotton or corn. When Frederick was 17, a new man came to the plantation, a slave breaker named Coivet. His job was to break the spirit of any man or woman who tried to escape, who longed to be free. The breaker saw that Frederick was not like the others. He liked being alone, reading on the grass whenever slaves were given a rest. He knew that Frederick had to be broken soon, before he taught the other slaves to read, to think for themselves. And so the breaker worked him, twice as hard as any man on the plantation. Even when he sat down to eat his lunch, Coivet watched him with a cold eye. One day, Frederick was working in the tobacco barn. It was a hot day, and so he began to grow tired. Dizzy and sick, he stumbled into the light, fell down beneath the oak tree. The breaker told Frederick to get up and finish his work. Frederick tried to explain, but Coivet didn't listen. Frederick felt the blow of the hickory stick against his head. The breaker hit him again and again until it crawled into the barn. That night, Frederick ran away. He hid in the woods and ate wild berries, drank water from the shallow stream. He knew he would be beaten or even killed if he returned. He had never felt so much pain or loneliness before. Lying in the dark of the woods, he wished he were an animal, a creature with fur and claws to protect himself. He wished he were a bird, able to soar over the treetops, fly on the wind as far as the sea. When the sun came up, Frederick heard somebody walking towards him. He was about to run when he saw a fellow slave, a kind man named Sandy. Frederick told him about the beating, and Sandy took him in. In front of the fire, he cleaned Frederick's wounds and gave him an Indian corn to eat. Sandy knew the magic of Africa, spells and charms other people brought to America on slave ships. He gave Frederick a magic root that would protect him from the breaker's whip. Frederick wanted to believe in magic, anything that would save his life. When he returned on the plantation, the breaker called him to the whipping post. Frederick saw the anger in Coivet's eyes and knew no magic would save him now. He knew that any man, slave or free, had to defend himself. The breaker struck him across the chest with his knotted whip. Frederick raised his arm to stop the second blow, and the fight began. While they kicked and hit each other, while they wrestled to the dirt, the slaves watched in disbelief. They had never seen a slave defend himself. They had never seen such courage. When the fight was over, the breaker looked at Frederick with new eyes. Fear was in his eyes, but also respect. Frederick knew that Coivet would never strike him again. He would never admit that a slave had fought back, a slave he couldn't break. That night, while he lay by the fire, Frederick thought of his mother. He remembered how she walked all night across the frozen fields just to hold him. He told himself that he would never think or act like a slave again. He promised his mother that one day he would escape, that all slaves would be free. Frederick looked up in the sky and saw the moon drifting through the clouds. After the moon came a star, pale and far off, but burning in the sky.